Good morning, Almond Glen. My name is Rob Smith. I'm the current president of the Almond Glen Owners Association and a member of the board of directors. And today is July the 10th, 2019. Excellent question popped up on Almond Glen Friends. Post questions primarily on the Almond Glen Facebook HOA page if you could, and that'll help them get to me. But I did see this one, and it was a great question about the reserves. So I announced as part of the open letter I did to the membership, one of the things I announced was that we were very proud of the fact we were able to transfer about $67,000 to the reserve, and that added up to bring us up to our goal of around $398,000, I think it is off the top of my head. So a great question was asked of, is there kind of a limit? And I'm going to kind of paraphrase the question, but as I understand the question, is there a limit to where we're going with those numbers? Do we raise the dues in order to help fund those numbers? And why do we need so much money? So first and foremost, yes, there are times where when we're calculating the budget, one of the things we take into consideration is what do our reserve numbers need to be for the year. So if our reserve numbers are going to fall short as a part of the overall budget, yes, the increase in dues could be seen as partly to cover that. Because we could underfund, and I think we did do that one year where we underfunded our planned reserve allotment for the year in order to not raise the dues. That was one way we kind of got around that. And then we made it up the next year to get ourselves on track. And that was part of a plan to not have to raise dues, to give a little bit of breathing room, and to try to just use the budget as frugally as possible. So yeah, to some degree, we do increase the dues to keep up with those. Now, as far as do we have an end goal for how much money we want to have in the reserve, the amount that we want to have in the reserve is based upon a reserve study that was done. And I think I've got the latest update. I've just not published it yet. So if I've not published it, I'll go ahead and do that. But the reserve study that we did, 2013, 2014, somewhere in there, was done in order to see what they do is an engineering firm looks at the assets we have in the community, and they say your assets will break down over time in this order. So they come in, they say this item will last for 10 years, this item will last for 5 years, this will last for 50 years, whatever. And that's going to be things like the roofs in the townhomes, any siding repairs that we can anticipate as an overall replacement, not just repairs, but a replacement of the roof, a replacement of the siding, a replacement of the lining in the pool, the replacement of the pump for the pool. Eventually that's going to break down. So they look at those things and they say, your pool pump will last for 15 years. And I'm making a number up. And replacement of that pool pump is going to be, let's just make it easy, $1,500. It's nowhere near correct. So in order to get there and have enough money that in 15 years when your pump breaks down, you'll have enough money, you need to save $100 per year until you have $1,500 in the bank. And at the 15th year, your pump breaks down, you replace it. Now it's under perfect circumstances, and we understand that that's not necessarily going to happen. The pump may last much longer than the anticipated amount of time, or the pump may break down sooner. So what we try to do is make sure we're consistently building the reserves in a way that will keep us on track, so that if the pump goes out in 5 years, we still have enough money in the bank to meet those needs. So we try to refund the reserves on the high side, and that has been a fiscal decision made by the board of directors every year that I've been on the board, except for, like I said, 1 year we decided to underfund with a plan to return the money at the end of the year of the next year. So we could do it the other way. We could underfund the reserves as a board. We could say, you know, let's not put money in the reserves and let's just cap it at the $400,000 we got, and we won't need to raise dues for years, and we can use pretty much all of the budget, the budget for an operating budget, because we split the operating budget, or split the money up that we get coming in, all the assessments, into our operating budget. That's the money that we're going to use to pay the bills throughout the year and to do things. And then we slide off the $67,000 from last year to go into the reserves. So when we're looking at our budget, that's part of what we take into account. We could underfund the reserves by saying from now on we won't put any more money in there, and that would give us a lot more operating capital. But then we could find ourselves in a situation where several things break down and we run into multiple issues, and we find ourselves having to come to the association and say, hey, we've got to do a mass assessment. And what that means is we come to you and we say, hey, the thing that broke down is going to cost, trying to think off the top of my head because I don't know, an easy number to do without breaking out a calculator real fast, but we need $100 from everybody in the community in order to pay this thing that needs to be replaced. So everybody in the community then has to do an additional assessment of $100 on top of your normal assessments you pay. And we don't want to get in that situation. What we'd rather do is, some people move in the neighborhood, they'll live here for 5 years, they'll move on, they'll live here for 2 years, some people live here for 10, 20 years. What we want to make sure is that the people who live here for 2 years or 5 years pay their part into it. What we don't want is that at the 20-year mark, we have things that need to be paid for, and only the people who live here at the 20-year mark have to pay for those things. If you live in the community and you're paying into the dues, you're paying your dues on time, and you're taking care of your bills with us, that means that you're helping pay for those expenses in the future. So that's the reason for the build-up the way it is. We had Sydney break out the budget and plan the reserve budget out for 25 years when he first set everything up, and that's kind of what we've been working on, is that 25-year plan. We pass that on to each board. Each board looks at it, makes a decision how they're going to move forward. I anticipate this year's board will do something very similar, and we'll stay on board with continuing to build the reserves the way we have. Eventually, we may get to the point by not using the reserve funds at the planned time. So, for instance, if the pool needs the lining replaced supposedly at 10 years, let's say, and we reach that 10-year mark, and we don't need to replace the lining, we can defer those expenses. We say, okay, well, we don't need to replace the lining right now, let's wait. And that allows us to build the reserves up a little more. So that might give us some capital that we could come to the board or come to the community and say, hey, we want to use a chunk of the reserves for a capital improvement of some sort. And I do have a capital improvement plan. I've always called it my 10-year plan for the future. I've not really discussed it because I don't know where we're going to go with everything, but right now the goal is to build the reserves up, to stay on track with the reserves, and see where we end up funding wise. If we go down that path and everything keeps working out great and the accounts are funded as well as they have been, hopefully we'll get to the point where we'll have enough money in there that we could come back to the community and say, hey, we've got a lot of money set aside and we're covered, we're good, and we'd like to take this amount of money, and maybe we could do some improvements at the pool. We could put up new umbrella systems or something larger that would cover the area, things that we think could improve the neighborhood. So the goal though is to fund the reserves appropriately, and then we'll see where it goes from there. I hope that answers the question, and I really appreciate the question that was posed, and it helps me come with ideas to put into these frequently asked questions, because it does get asked on a regular basis, and I do want people to understand, because I won't always be on the board. I don't know what tomorrow's gonna bring. We're not promised tomorrow. I wanna make sure that everybody knows what we were thinking today so they can figure out what they should do tomorrow. Thanks a lot.